When the Conservative government was defeated, we were so happy.
Please rise for the arrival of Premier Designate and Mrs. Terry McGuinty.
We really hoped that when McGuinty was elected, we would see some change, we would see some action.
The last government looked for enemies. It looked for enemies in interest groups, labor, spokesmen for the poor, the homeless, that sort of thing. That tone is entirely missing from this government. It may not be that they've accomplished everything that the interest groups would want them to accomplish, but they don't go looking for enemies.
I would give the McGuinty government an F.
I would give them a failing grade.
Probably a D+ at this point.
Didn't do nearly as well as expected, given the circumstances.
The damage to families and communities caused during the Harris years was pretty severe and really needed to be addressed.
We must get the province's fiscal house in order.
The cold shower got turned on very early on.
We did not create the $5.6 billion Tory deficit, Mr. Speaker, but we will eliminate it.
Tax cuts introduced by Conservative Premier Mike Harris in the 1990s mostly benefited the wealthy. These tax cuts greatly reduced government revenue and caused severe damage to public services. While campaigning for election in 2003, Dalton McGuinty, Liberal leader, had promised to restore the public sector. But he had also signed a pledge to the right-wing Canadian Taxpayers Federation that he would not raise taxes. How would Dalton McGuinty address the social deficit left by Harris without raising taxes? Economist Hugh Mackenzie believes the Liberals decided to ignore it.
We don't want to hear about all those bad things that happened. This is a new government and we're starting from square zero. We are demanding that you forget the depth of the hole that you started in.
So if I were to grade McGuinty on his performance on healthcare, I would say that the grade would have to range from a C at the best to an F at the worst.
The provincial Tories began the privatization of healthcare. The Liberals promised to halt it.
I would suppose the best thing that they've done has really been to reverse the private MRI, CT clinics and take a line on more privatization of clinics. I think the worst policy that they have pursued in healthcare is P3 hospitals.
Public-private partnerships, or P3s, were introduced by the Harris government for the building of hospitals. The government forms a partnership with a private company. That company borrows privately for the project, puts up the building, and may continue to own and operate the hospital for 20, 30, or even 60 years. A public asset gets turned into a profit generator for private companies.
The P3 hospital was introduced to Brampton, was forced on Brampton by Tony Clement and the Harris government of the time. The people had no say in it, and so we started an anti-P3 campaign, which was very successful also. In fact, the 3 Conservative MPPs in Brampton were defeated by the Liberals in the 2003 election.
Then when they got elected, within very short order, they moved forward with the 2 P3 hospitals in Brampton and Ottawa that they had promised to cancel, and then renamed the projects alternative financing mechanisms to try and confuse the issue, but they really are P3s, and have gone forward with the announcement of 32 additional privatized hospitals.
The deal is completely secret. We don't know what we're paying for. We were sold this deal, promised a new 600-bed hospital, and now it comes out we're getting 350 beds. When the deal started, this hospital was to cost about $350 million. It's now well over $500 million.
The government could have borrowed the money to build that hospital at 4.5%. Instead, by contract, it's paying the provider enough to support borrowing the money at 6.5%. And the difference between the 4.5% and the 6.5% is about 30% in the ultimate cost of the project. Does that make any sense at all to anybody?
I think that they're absolutely caught in this kind of Blair, Tony Blair in Britain, his third way kind of politics, very actually right-wing politics that want to restructure public services based on market models. We've mounted referendums in 5 towns now across the province, huge referendums. Definitely they feel the heat.
Or, if you want to give it away to McGuinty's friends, the answer is no. Have you got a moment?
Certainly on stopping the 2-tier clinics, our pressure has definitely worked. The government has modified the P3s to the extent that none of them have as much privatization in them as the Brampton and Ottawa deals.
Hi, it's the VUN nurse calling.
In home care, the Mike Harris government had introduced competitive bidding. Long-established non-profit agencies, such as the Victorian Order of Nurses, had to compete for contracts with private corporations. Before the election, the Liberals said they would eliminate competitive bidding, but they didn't deliver on the promise.
Every time we have an RFP, we don't know if we're going to be successful. I don't know if I'm going to have a job. The stress level is phenomenal. I can't believe at 50 years old, I'm going to be concerned on what I'm going to do for the rest of my life or how I'm going to actually pay and keep for the rest of my life, my family. I don't know.
Well, it's very frustrating for the nurses that are going in. They want to go in, they want to spend time with the client, deliver the care, and have personal interaction. That's the way it used to be before managed competition, and now they can't. The whole process around managed competition is faster and cheaper, and if you can't deliver the service faster and cheaper, you're going to lose the contract, your agency will fail to survive. Well, for 10 years now, it's been very difficult to attract nurses into community care. The average age of the nurses in my particular agency is over 50. They're going to be retiring in the next 10 years. Once those nurses are gone, I don't know what's going to happen.
Dalton McGuinty said he wanted to be known as the education premier. But while the Liberals have made some improvements to education funding, they have not changed the Tories' funding formula. A funding formula which is still causing major shortfalls for school boards across the province.
When the Liberal government was in opposition, they knew that there was something wrong with the funding formula. But now that they're in the government, they have not rescinded that funding formula.
We worked very hard to make education an issue before the last election, and they were the beneficiaries of our work. And instead of rebuilding our public schools, they're tearing them apart. They're demanding another drastic round of cuts to our schools.
The government may not provide enough money for school boards to pay teachers or to maintain buildings, but the school boards are going to do those things. They have to. The only way that they can find the money to do that is to shortchange anything that isn't part of the basic requirement. And the stuff that's not part of the basic requirement is things like special education programs and programs for students at risk because of poverty or other issues. It's English as a second language program.
They're showing that they're of the same stripe as the Harris government, and I would give them a failing grade.
Post-secondary tuition fees more than doubled under the Bob Rae and Mike Harris governments. In the 2003 election campaign, Dalton McGuinty promised to implement a tuition fee freeze. After 2 years in power, the Liberals announced tuition fee increases of 20% to 36% over 4 years.
First year can go up by a maximum of 4.5%. Second and subsequent years by a maximum.
Before you looked at anything. Consultation started in August. You cut them off in September. How dare you tell us you consulted?
Dalton McGuinty has broken his promise to the student body. We are losing a lot of graduates. We are losing a lot of young, talented individuals who are not even thinking of pursuing university education because of the fear of the student debt and of the huge $60,000 debt load they will when they graduate.